After 17 years of tireless dedication to a company, I was let go without so much as a thank you. The job I used to handle all by myself now requires 3 new hires, and they still can't keep up. Ironically, my former coworkers, now friends, keep calling me step by step like I never left. They want my help. They want me to cover up the fact that they're not quite good enough. But I made it clear, if the company wants my help, they can rehire me. Now, somehow, I'm the bad guy. Am I being too harsh? Or is this just the first time I've finally chosen to stand up for myself? I never imagined I would leave the company through a layoff email. For the past 17 years, I lived and breathed this job from the very first days. Nervous, unsure, stepping into the office for the first time, I never stopped learning. I took notes on every process, every scenario, and slowly grew into someone who not only did the work, but trained others to do it too. I may not have had the most impressive academic credentials, but I understood the system, I understood people, and most importantly, I understood how everything worked, because I helped build it. I never held a fancy title like senior manager, but I was the person the team turned to when things got messy. I knew how to untangle knots without wasting time in endless meetings. From interns to mid-level managers, every new hire had, at some point, learned the ropes from me. I had a hard drive full of work tips, detailed notes, and shortcuts, things only someone who truly did the work and cared would take the time to document. Then came the announcement: company restructuring. Just like that, people like me and my direct manager, who had worked there for over a decade too, were cut. No warning, no transition plan, not even a thank you. Just a cold message. Thanks for your time, but we have to make cuts for cost-saving reasons. They thought cutting a high salary like mine was a solution. They forgot that the real cost isn't in the paycheck. It's in what you lose when the person who holds the operational memory of an entire system walks out the door. I was shocked, but I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt empty. When you give almost 2 decades to a place, it stops being just a job. It becomes part of who you are. Being let go that easily, that coldly, made me question, was my value ever truly seen? And the answer, clearly, was no. But the irony didn't stop there. After I left, they had to split my workload among 3 different people, 3 different salaries, 3 different job descriptions. And still, they struggled. The new team lacked real-world experience. They didn't know the small but critical details, the complex corners I had spent years identifying and optimizing. I began to understand something. Sometimes people only realize your value once you're gone. And even more painfully, sometimes they do realize it, but don't have the courage to admit it. Because of ego. Because of power. Because admitting it would mean facing their own pride. And as if that wasn't bitter enough, I became a shadow the company still leaned on, indirectly. Old coworkers, still keeping in touch like friends, started calling and texting with questions. How to locate internal reports, how to handle certain clients, how to operate parts of the system I had built. They needed me, yet couldn't publicly admit it. And here I was, struggling to find a new job, facing a tough question. Should I help them? Right after I was laid off, a rumor started circulating around the office. No one can replace him. At first, I thought it was just something people said to make me feel better as I walked out the door. But a few weeks later, I realized it wasn't just words. The company, scrambling to mask the internal shock of cutting loose someone who'd been around for years, quickly brought in 3 new hires to split up the workload I used to manage. One person handled paperwork and internal processes, another managed reports, and a third was in charge of training new staff. I heard through former colleagues that even with the work divided like that, the 3 of them were struggling. Everything was out of sync, operations were off track, files went missing, regular reports were late or inaccurate. The problem wasn't their individual competence. They had solid credentials and plenty of experience elsewhere. What they lacked was first-hand knowledge of the soul of the system, something I had built and nurtured like a passion project. They didn't know that the data summary file had a hidden formula designed to catch critical errors. They didn't realize that Process A had been quietly streamlined from 7 steps to 4, thanks to an informal agreement between 3 departments, something never documented. They couldn't have known, because they'd never lived it like I had. I remember one time back when I was still working, I caught a rare system bug that duplicated a financial transaction in the accounting software. It was incredibly hard to detect, but if left unchecked, it could have caused thousands of dollars in losses every month. I quietly fixed it, noted it down, and updated the internal documentation. But now, the person who replaced me didn't know about it. They made the same mistake, and then they pointed fingers, unsure of who was even responsible for that part. The chaos went on, not only hurting performance but also shaking the confidence of other departments. Clients started complaining. Partners were surprised when they didn't get the usual responses. New employees felt lost without someone to patiently walk them through things. And then I got the first call. It was from a former colleague, someone I had trained. They said, "Can you help me real quick? There's a couple things we just can't figure out. And I think you're the only one who ever handled them." I was silent for a few seconds, not because I didn't want to help. Helping was instinctual. But I was torn. If I kept helping, they'd never have to face the deeper issue, how flawed the system had become without a proper understanding of what held it together. Then came the messages. Some casual, some desperate, some playfully manipulative. Just 5 minutes, I swear. "If you don't explain this, I'm going to get chewed out. Come on, you were the one who handled this. Just help us one last time." I got it. I really did. I used to be in their shoes, except now. I was the one without a job, while they still had theirs. But at last, I began to see something I had previously refused to admit. I wasn't let go because of budget cuts. I was undervalued, unfairly replaced, and worst of all, treated like a free resource even after I was gone. That's when I started setting boundaries, something I had never done before. At first, the messages from old friends asking about work felt a little hesitant, like they understood I'd just gone through something heavy and needed time. But as the days passed, the line between friendship and taking advantage of a connection started to blur. I used to think, helping them once won't hurt, but it never stopped at once. The moment you answer one question, they assume you'll answer the next, and the next. A message pops up at 9 p.m. "Hey, we've got a big meeting tomorrow, and I can't find the old customer data report. Do you remember where that file is?" Or on an early weekend morning, "Hi, there's this manual process you used to handle in the system. Do you remember the steps? Our new boss is pressing us hard." I started to feel like an unpaid help desk. And strangely, when I didn't respond right away, they began to get frustrated. Not like friends who needed a favor, but like I owed them something. Once I said no because I was just too drained, and the reply came back with just one line. "I thought you were still a friend." That line hit me hard. I am still a friend, but it seems like maybe they're not. At least not in the way I used to define friendship. A friend doesn't use closeness as an excuse to avoid doing the work. A friend doesn't throw you under the bus to protect themselves at work, especially not at a job that had already let you go. I understand their fear. When things aren't going well, everyone wants to cling to something familiar. But I can't keep being the shadow that makes the system run while I cast out from it. I'm still trying to survive day by day. I used to help them get better at the job. I stayed late to train. I covered for their small mistakes so they wouldn't get called out. But now, they want me to keep protecting them from facing the truth, that they might not be good enough yet. And what hurts even more is that when I say no, they don't thank me for everything I did in the past. Instead, they sulk, as if I abandoned them. It made me really think, can friendships survive when only one side is trying to maintain boundaries and respect? Or does it become something twisted when people use the word friend to guilt you into doing what they should be doing themselves? I don't hate them. I don't even blame them. But I have to stop. Not just out of self-respect, but because I need to focus on finding a job. A journey that's just as exhausting as juggling 2 or 3 jobs at once. I don't have the energy to keep playing the role of the invisible but irreplaceable one. So I started saying it clearly. I can't help anymore. If the company wants my support, they can rehire me at a fair rate. Everything I knew, I gave fully while I was there. Now, I need to take care of myself. The reactions varied. Some stayed silent, some got upset, a few apologized. But most said nothing. As if once I was no longer useful, I was no longer a friend in their eyes. I still remember the moment I decided to draw a clear boundary, as if it were etched into my memory. It wasn't an easy decision, and it definitely didn't bring instant relief. In fact, it felt like I was going against my own nature, the same instinct that had always made me willing to help, even when I was completely burned out. But I knew that if I didn't stop, I'd be trapped in an invisible role, the behind-the-scenes hero who never gets acknowledged. I had already played that part back when I was still at the company. Now I'd been laid off, yet they still expected me to keep doing the same work. Solve problems, stay available, ask for nothing, and expect no official recognition or pay. So I started replying to messages like this. I'm really sorry. I care about you all, but I can't help anymore. If the company needs support, they're welcome to reach out and rehire me under a proper contract. I don't work there anymore, and I need to focus fully on finding a new job. I thought that message would be enough for them to understand, but I was wrong. Some stayed silent. Some just read it and disappeared like I never existed. And a few, people I once believed were friends, started saying things that were very different from before. One message stood out. It was long, but one part made me stop cold. You're making us look completely incompetent. It's not our fault you got fired. You're embarrassing us in front of upper management. Why are you blowing this out of proportion? I sat there in silence for a long time, not because I didn't know how to respond, but because it hurt. It hurt not just to be blamed, but because the very people who once carried the team with me were now turning their backs, just because I refused to keep working for free. Suddenly, I was called selfish, someone who puts friends in a tough spot, the one making others look bad by choosing not to help. One even mocked me, saying, "You don't even have a job right now. Stingy much? Helping with a few messages wouldn't kill you. Or are you just bitter from being unemployed too long?" That's when I realized this wasn't just about right and wrong anymore. It was about a brutal truth. When you're no longer useful to some people, they'll twist your identity just to cover up their own incompetence. And then the bitter truth hit me even harder. They never needed me for who I was. They needed me because I was the only one who could keep their lack of ability hidden. I was their unspoken shield, the person who made them look good in front of their new bosses. But now that I refused to be the shield, I had become the target. I asked myself, if they truly saw me as a friend, would they really make me out to be the bad guy just because I chose to prioritize my own life and career? I didn't respond to all the accusations. I simply saved them. As a reminder, sometimes boundaries don't create distance. They just reveal who was never truly standing with you when you had nothing left to give. I'm not angry. I'm just sad. Sad that I had to choose between staying loyal to myself and clinging to the fake closeness of those who once called me the big brother, the team leader, the one we can't live without. But I don't regret it. Because if I don't respect my own time, labor, and dignity, who else will? After I set my boundaries, after all the criticism and the cold silence, the first thing I felt was loneliness. Not the kind that comes from having no one around, but the kind that comes from stepping outside an old, worn-out circle. A place that used to feel like home, but now feels more like a cage. I didn't land a new job right away. Most of my days were spent rewriting my resume, fine-tuning applications, and reading through hundreds of job descriptions, many of which I was more than qualified for, even overqualified, yet still received no response. The job market was harsher than I expected. They say, job hunting is a full-time job, and I can confirm it's true. There wasn't a single day I didn't question myself. Was I wrong to say no to an old friend? If I had just compromised a little, would they still like me? Did I lose everything just because I stood by my principles? But then I'd look at my shrinking bank account, at the empty inbox without interview invites, at the restless nights I spent tossing and turning, weighed down by the pressure of bills and survival, and I realized a harsh but necessary truth. I don't have the luxury to keep sacrificing myself for other people's comfort. I was no longer an employee of that company. No longer the fixer, no longer the one people called when there was a crisis. And I didn't want to be the person only remembered when someone needed help, but forgotten when I needed someone to simply ask, "Hey, how are you doing?" So I turned my focus inward. I started learning new skills, exploring areas I'd once ignored because I was too busy. I went to networking events, places where no one knew I'd once been a pillar of a company. There, I was just me. No title, no backstory, and strangely enough, no one expected me to save them from their mess. Little by little, I started breathing more evenly. I also began rebuilding relationships, this time based on mutual respect and honesty, not obligation or old friendship. I learned how to say no, clearly and kindly, without guilt. I learned to value my time like the precious resource it is, because it truly is. And then, I noticed something. There's a quiet kind of justice in life. The people who once criticized me for not helping started to struggle under the very responsibilities they once tried to hand off to me. A few, just a few, reached out and messaged me. Back then, I didn't understand what you were going through. Now I see how strong you really were. I don't blame them anymore, because I too once didn't understand the value of personal boundaries until I was pushed to my absolute limit. I don't have a fairy tale ending. I'm still job hunting, still not settled, but now I know one thing for sure. I'm no longer the kind of person who can be easily used just because I'm nice, and I'm grateful for the past, even the days when I was called selfish, lazy, or disloyal, because those moments taught me the most important lesson of adulthood. Not everyone deserves your help, and sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's the highest form of self-respect.